Hi, it's Rob Bryanton, and I'm here today with a very special guest, a good friend of mine for many, many years. Jack and I go a long way back. This is Jack Semple, and Jack is a guest on the show today because I wanted to get a chance to talk about some of the ideas that we really haven't spent a lot of time exploring yet in the whole imagining the 10th dimension concept. And that's the role of creativity and the role that music plays in the way that ideas are connected together across time and space. So, just to get things started here, I wanted to first of all start by reading something from Imagine the 10th Dimension that talks about a basic idea that I think is important to what we're talking about here. And this relates to the idea of memes, which of course is the Richard Dawkins concept of ideas that connect across time and space, but it also ties in something else. So the couple of paragraphs I'm going to read here says, one particularly infectious meme is contained within the Julian Jaynes book, The Evolution of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. This innovative and challenging work advances the theory that self-awareness, that is to say consciousness, is a relatively recent development in human history, perhaps only within the last few thousand years. Prior to that time, Mr. Jaynes contends, our conscious and subconscious minds were integrated, and we heard suggestions for future actions from our subconscious mind as a voice or voices that we often interpreted as messages from the gods or departed loved ones. We still often exist in that more integrated state of mind, where we live within the moment, rather than create an inner monologue, watching and describing to ourselves what it is we're doing. Sometimes, interestingly enough, we must exist in that more integrated state of mind, because otherwise there are tasks that we would find ourselves incapable of doing. And that's where we get to master musician Jack Semple, who I've known for many years, and Jack is an amazing guy because he is like a musical encyclopedia. He straddles many, many different worlds. He's made a study of classical music. He's worked in a number of ethnic styles. He's well known as a blues rock guitarist here in town. And what am I missing? And jazz, of course. You play a lot of jazz as well. And it's interesting because some of the stuff you play, I know there's no way that you are thinking about every single thing that you're doing. Can you talk a little bit about that as a musician trying to play really complicated things?
Yeah, well, when you have like this, that's just a chromatic scale, which is just a basic, fundamental kind of scale that you have to practice to get your fingers synchronized. But there was 4 times 6 notes in it, but I wasn't thinking about each one. I was thinking about that as all one thing.
Right.
Just a chromatic scale, and I can play a chromatic scale. I don't have to think about it. It's just a chromatic scale, and things like diminished scales, that has a certain intervallic connection. Each note is 3 semitones away from the last, and I could talk about it for 10 minutes, but it just takes up one little piece of my brain to remember one thing, to remember, not a whole bunch of things. I don't have to analyze it.
Right. Now, you were talking just before we started recording this show about some of the mental tricks you use to stop yourself from thinking about the ideas of what you're playing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, one thing about playing music is, or playing an instrument, which is a mechanical thing on one level, there's a lot of things to remember, especially if you're playing a piece of music that you've learned note for note from another composer. When you're improvising on your own, you don't really have to think ahead further than a millisecond. But when you're playing something that has to be right, exactly the same each time, there's a lot more to think about and a lot more brain activity. And what can happen is you can start self-analyzing yourself as you're going by. Am I doing a good job? Am I remembering the next piece? Gee, I hope I'm going to remember the next lick. Gee, that last lick could have been better. Oh, I was pretty good. All those thoughts go through your mind while you're playing, and it's just like trying to jump hurdles with somebody throwing bowling balls, from the sidelines. It's impossible. So technique I do is I don't think about anything. or I think about something abstract like a color or a feeling or a temperature or something, and it seems to function as a trigger to unlock those files that need to be processed, but I don't have to analyze them or even look at them as they go by. Like, for example, there's this one piece by Lenny Breau. Lenny Breau is a master guitar player, jazz guitar player, and I adore his music so much that I actually learned note for note one piece. And I'll just play a bit of it. It goes... those chords, particularly the last ones, are voicings that I never use. Personally, they're not in my vocabulary other than that single song. So when I'm going through them, I'm thinking of geometric shapes sometimes, like the fingering shapes, but if you ask me to start in the middle of it and go, and go to the end, sometimes I have to start from the beginning because that's the piece of information that I've got as one piece.
Right.
And if I subdivide it, I'm in trouble. But if I start from the beginning, no problem. I can be thinking about what I'm going to have for lunch.
But that's something that you arrive at after many hours of practice,
Oh,
of
yeah.
course. And
Yeah.
I think it's the same. I mean, Jack and I many years ago played in a band, and every morning Jack would get up, and the first thing he'd do is pick up his guitar and start practicing phrases and working on things that he'd been learning over the last few days. And it's one of the things I really respect about you, because you found ways to mentally catalog all these different styles and all these different playing techniques, and keep them separate from each other. When you're in an improvisation scenario, then how are you going through this huge metal catalog that you got and plucking each of those ideas from the air?
Well, what you do is, like, music is, on one level, and on the most important level, an emotional language. And so what I do is I attach how I'm feeling at the time to my repertoire of licks that feel that way. So I don't have to think analytically, this is a pentatonic scale starting on the third degree of the fourth mode. I don't have to think about that. I just think of, something that's mournful. And I'm just feeling that instead of going, analyzing what the pitches are or whatever.
Sure.
And that the thing that goes along for the ride, which is interesting, is your physiology. Like, I know my facial expressions and stuff. If you think of B.B. King, he's got those. Because he actually is emotionally going through it.
Right.
And so your emotional physiology is connected to your music.
Right. That's actually gets into something I wanted to talk a little bit about today, which is the relationship between music and speech, and blues being a really good example of how phrases that when you speak them, they have a mournful quality to them, and you can translate those directly to playing those as musical phrases as well.
Yeah.